On November 25, 1177, the desert winds carried a sound Saladin had never heard, the war cry of Templar knights charging at full speed. What followed was a slaughter so shocking, Saladin barely escaped with his life. This is Montgisard. The sun of late November hung low over the Judean hills, casting long golden shadows across a land that had known more blood than rain. The wind drifted in thin, dusty veils across the rocky valleys, carrying with it the distant scent of the sea and the whisper of an approaching storm, one made not of thunder and lightning, but of steel hooves and war. It was the year 1177, and the kingdom of Jerusalem trembled on the breath of fate. For months, rumors had crawled across the desert like snakes. Saladin was advancing, not with a raiding party, not with a probing force, but with the full fury of his empire. From Egypt to Damascus, warriors answered his call, light cavalry with quivers full of death, Sudanese infantry hardened by years of bloody campaign, Mamluk elites armored in lamellar iron. Thousands upon thousands marching beneath the crescent banner, and their target was clear, the heart of Christendom in the east, Jerusalem itself. But in that holy city, a young king stood silently upon the battlements, staring at the horizon as if he could challenge fate by will alone. His fingers, thin and pale, rested upon the cool stone. His face, what remained visible, was wrapped in clean linen to shield the ravages of the disease that gnawed at him day by day. This was Baldwin IV, the Leper king, 16 years old. Mark of death upon his skin, mark of leadership upon his soul. His advisors begged him to retreat. His council urged him to rely on castles and walls. The army was scattered, the nobles divided, the Templars too few. News reached him that Saladin's forces had slipped past Gaza, evading the main Crusader army sent north. The Muslim host now advanced freely along the coastal plain, sweeping aside small garrisons, burning crops, taking prisoners, and mocking the kingdom's helplessness. Jerusalem was exposed, the boy king was isolated, and the enemy marched with terrifying speed. Yet Baldwin did not break, he did not bow. His eyes, blue and sharp with determination, never left the southern road. Because somewhere deep in the fragile cage of his failing body, there was a fire that disease could not consume, the heart of a warrior, king. While the nobles debated and fear choked the city, Baldwin summoned the Templars from Jerusalem. He ordered every knight within reach to gather. He called upon the surviving militia, the scattered remnants of the feudal levies, and whatever men of faith would stand beside him. They came, some armored, some not. Some seasoned, some barely trained, but they came because their king had asked it of them, and when they saw him mount his horse, despite pain, despite weakness, despite the protest of physicians, they knew they followed not a sickly youth, but a symbol of defiance, a symbol of duty, a symbol of Jerusalem's unbroken will. The small army rode south, the hooves of their few hundred horses kicking up dust that shimmered in the dying light. Baldwin rode at the head, cradled by the powerful white horse that had borne him through many battles. The Templar cross flapped at his side, red against white, a flash of defiance against the emptiness of the desert. Every mile south brought new horrors, villages burned, corpses left unburied, survivors hiding among the ruins, trembling as they described the sheer scale of Saladin's oncoming horde. The enemy was everywhere, like a living shadow stretching across the land. But Baldwin did not slow. His commanders whispered in disbelief, "Your Majesty, we cannot meet them in the open. We are too few. Let us retreat and fortify Jerusalem. This is certain death." But Baldwin answered softly, "If we retreat, Jerusalem falls. If Jerusalem falls, so falls everything." At dusk on the second day, the small Crusader army crested a ridge overlooking the wide plains near Ramla. What they saw froze the blood in their veins. The horizon was alive, not with light, but with movement. Like waves of black ants swarming across the earth, Saladin's army stretched farther than the eye could see, columns upon columns, riders upon riders, banners fluttering like the wings of ravens. Campfires dotted the land like constellations fallen from the sky. The roar of voices echoed faintly even from miles away. The men behind Baldwin exchanged terrified glances. Some clutched their crucifixes, some whispered prayers, some simply stared in mute disbelief. This was no ordinary army. This was the might of an empire, an army built to crush kingdoms, not skirmish with them. But Baldwin did not flinch. He narrowed his eyes, studying the distant mass with a strategist's hunger. He saw strength, but he also saw overconfidence. He saw numbers, but he also saw complacency. Saladin believed the Christians were broken, scattered, helpless. He believed the boy, king, was weak. He believed Jerusalem would offer no resistance. He believed victory was already written. Baldwin allowed himself a thin, cold smile. Night fell over the plains like a curtain of black velvet. The Crusader army camped on a ridge. Few fires, little warmth, the silence broken only by soft prayers, and the ring of steel being sharpened. Many men did not sleep. Some stared at the stars, wondering if they would ever see them again. Others whispered to each other about the legend of Saladin, the invincible general, the scourge of the Crusaders. But amid that fear, Baldwin slept, not peacefully, but with a calm born of conviction. At dawn, the world awoke to a sky the color of burning gold. The desert wind blew gently across the land, carrying the distant clamor of Saladin's vast army preparing to move again. Baldwin mounted his horse. His pale hands trembled, not from fear, but from the disease chewing at his flesh. Yet when he raised his banner, the Templars lifted their helmets, and every knight straightened his back. Behind him stood only a few hundred, before him tens of thousands, but the moment Baldwin lowered his visor, the moment the sun struck the cross upon his crown, the moment the wind wrapped around him like a cloak, a strange certainty fell over the men. They were about to witness something history would never forget. For on this day, the Leper King would not be remembered for his illness. He would be remembered for his courage, his defiance, and the impossible battle he was about to unleash. The morning of November 25th, 1177 broke with startling clarity. A cold, biting wind sweeping across the plains of Montgisard, pushing thin clouds across a pale blue sky. It was the kind of morning that hid nothing, revealed everything, and offered no mercy to the weak. For Baldwin IV and his small host, it was the morning they would challenge fate itself. Saladin's army stretched for miles, relaxed and unprepared for battle. He believed the Crusaders were far away, days away. He believed the boy, king, was cowering behind Jerusalem's walls. He believed he had already won. But in that deceptive calm, with the desert wind tugging at his cloak, Baldwin IV lifted his banner high, and history shifted. The moment of decision, the Crusaders had maneuvered silently through the hills, using the landscape as their shield. When Baldwin's scouts confirmed Saladin's vanguard was unaware of their presence, the young king did something no one expected. He ordered an attack, not a defensive stand, not a cautious delay. A full cavalry charge straight into the heart of the most powerful army in the east. The Templars looked at one another as if unsure they had heard correctly. The Hospitallers tightened their grips on their lances. The knights waited for the king to waver, but the king of Jerusalem did not waver. He pulled his sword from its scabbard, raised it toward the sun, and with a voice ragged from sickness yet filled with fire, shouted, "For Jerusalem!" The cry shot through the Crusader line like lightning. Lances lowered, shields locked. The ground trembled beneath the weight of armored war horses, and then they rode. The Templar spearhead, the Templars struck first. Their formation formed a wedge, a living spear of iron and fury, designed to break the strongest lines. Their white cloaks with the red cross snapped violently in the wind as the thunder of hooves grew louder, louder, until the very earth shook beneath them. Saladin's forward units, caught completely off guard, scrambled into position, but the Templars were already upon them. The clash was devastating. The first rank of Muslim cavalry shattered like pottery under a hammer. Bodies were thrown aside by sheer momentum. The Templars punched through, splitting the center like a blade cutting silk. Saladin himself watched from a distance, disbelief tightening his jaw. This was no skirmish. This was no desperate retreat. This was Baldwin hitting him with everything he had, a desperate blow aimed not at survival, but at victory, Fire, Baldwin rides into hell. Behind the Templars came Baldwin and the Knights of Jerusalem. The king rode at the front, his weakened hands strapped to the reins so he would not drop them. His sword glinted in the sun as he guided his horse directly into the chaos. The men around him saw the linen wrappings beneath his helm, the pale skin, the trembling, the illness. And yet they watched their king throw himself into the worst of the fighting. It ignited something inside them. A soldier shouted, "The king rides with us." Another roared, "God is with Baldwin." And suddenly the fear that had gripped them for days burned away. The Crusader line smashed into Saladin's rear ranks as Baldwin's horse crashed into a wave of enemy cavalry. Steel rang against steel, bodies toppled, dust and blood filled the air. The king fought like a man who had already accepted death and had chosen to meet it with a sword in hand. Saladin's army collapses, Saladin's confidence dissolved as quickly as the sand beneath his boots. The great general, undefeated for years, suddenly saw chaos erupt across his entire army. The tightly coordinated formation began to buckle. His light cavalry could not maneuver. His infantry could not brace. His archers had no time to regroup. The Crusaders exploited every weakness. Baldwin forced the advance deeper. The Templars carved a corridor of devastation. The Knights of Jerusalem pushed flank after flank. Panic spread like wildfire. Some soldiers fled, some threw down their weapons, some tried desperately to reform lines, but the momentum was gone. Saladin's army, the pride of Egypt and Syria, was unraveling under a force barely one-tenth its size. The rout begins. What happened next shocked even the Crusaders. The Muslim lines broke. Thousands began to retreat in a frantic wave, colliding with their own ranks as they fled toward the south. Horses trampled men. Supplies were abandoned. Banners fell into the dust. Saladin himself narrowly avoided capture. His personal guard was cut down. His standard bearer was killed. He escaped with only a handful of companions, riding hard to save his life, something no one had believed possible. The great lion of the east, running, behind him, the desert became a graveyard of shattered shields, broken spears, and torn banners. The earth drank the blood of thousands. The air shook with the cries of the wounded and the thunder of retreating hooves. The Battle of Montgisard was not merely a victory, it was a decimation. Baldwin stands victorious as the dust settled. Baldwin Roman IV rode to a rise overlooking the battlefield. His breath trembled, pain surged through his limbs. His men could see the exhaustion in his body, yet the fire in his eyes had not dimmed. The teenage king raised his sword one last time, the blade stained with the dust of victory. Around him, knights shouted in jubilation, Templars knelt in prayer, and the wounded lifted their hands toward heaven. Against the greatest odds, against the greatest general, against the greatest army of the East, they had won. Montgisard would never be forgotten, for on that day, in the face of impossible odds, a dying king rewrote the destiny of his kingdom and carved his name into eternity. The Battle of Montgisard did not fade like dust in the desert wind. It carved itself into the chronicles of both East and West, becoming a moment where history bent beneath the will of a single young king and the courage of a few hundred men. To understand why Montgisard matters, why it still echoes across centuries, we must look beyond the swords, beyond the blood, beyond the roar of battle. We must look at what Baldwin Roman IV's victory meant to the world. Via a victory that defied reality, Montgisard was not a battle the Crusaders could logically win. The odds were beyond impossible. Baldwin Roman IV commanded perhaps 500-600 knights, including the Templars. Saladin marched with an army estimated at 20,000-26,000, professional, experienced, and confident. The Crusaders were physically exhausted, undersupplied, and caught far from their defensive strongholds. Their king, their symbol, was a 16-year-old boy ravaged by leprosy. Every military calculation pointed to annihilation, and yet they won, not just narrowly, not by luck, but decisively. The victory was so overwhelming, so humiliating for Saladin, that chroniclers struggled to explain it even decades later. Some called it divine intervention, others called it genius, many simply called it a miracle. But what cannot be denied is this: Montgisard shattered the myth that Saladin was unbeatable, and it showed the medieval world that courage, unity, and resolve could rewrite destiny. The Leper King becomes a legend before Montgisard. Baldwin IV was pitied as much as he was respected. He was seen as a tragic figure, intelligent, brave, but ultimately doomed by the disease eating away at his body. After Montgisard, the world no longer saw the disease. They saw the king, a king who led a cavalry charge. A king who refused to retreat, a king who fought among his men despite pain few could endure, a king who, with death tightening its grip on him, dealt a blow to the mightiest commander in the Muslim world. Montgisard transformed Baldwin IV into a legend of medieval warfare, a symbol of willpower triumphing over human frailty. Even Muslim chroniclers, often hostile to Crusader rulers, wrote with respect about Baldwin's courage. They understood something the whole world would eventually see. Baldwin IV's body may have been weak, but his spirit was unbreakable. The survival of the Kingdom of Jerusalem without Montgisard, the Crusader states, would have likely collapsed decades earlier. Saladin's 1177 campaign was designed not for raiding, not for show, but for conquest. He intended to take Jerusalem itself, ending the Crusader presence in the Holy Land in one victorious stroke. Montgisard destroyed that plan. It forced Saladin into years of rebuilding. It bought Jerusalem precious time. It preserved the fragile balance between Crusader and Muslim powers for another decade. Had Baldwin IV not struck at Montgisard, the Third Crusade might never have happened. Richard the Lionheart might never have sailed east, and the legend of the Crusader states could have ended in 1177 instead of 1291. Montgisard was a hinge of history, turning the fate of an entire region. A lesson in leadership. What Baldwin IV did on that battlefield still resonates today because it teaches one of the most powerful truths of leadership. In desperate times, it is not the strength of the body that matters, but the strength of the soul. He did not hide behind walls. He did not let fear rule him. He rode into battle at the front, not the rear. His presence turned hopeless soldiers into unstoppable warriors. His courage became their courage. His defiance became their victory. Montgisard is a reminder that true leadership is not about perfection or physical power. It is about conviction, sacrifice, and the willingness to face impossible odds for the sake of others. A legacy that defies time centuries later. Montgisard still stands as one of the most astonishing upsets in military history. Strategists study it. Historians marvel at it. Novelists and filmmakers return to it again and again. Because it is not just a battle, it is a testament to human will. It is the story of a dying king who refused to surrender. It is the moment when the weak defeated the overwhelming strong. It is proof that even in the darkest hours, courage can ignite miracles. And so, the sands of Montgisard continue to whisper across time: greatness is not given. It is forged in the fire of impossible battles. In the fading light of that November evening, when the dust settled and the cries of war drifted into silence, the field of Montgisard stood as proof that history is never written by numbers alone. It is written by hearts that refuse to yield, by souls that burn brighter than the armies facing them. As Baldwin IV surveyed the battlefield, his body shook not from fear, but from the disease that clawed at him every waking hour. Yet there he sat, helmet dented, linen-stained, sword trembling in his hand, looking over a victory so improbable that even his enemies struggled to explain it. He should have died long before this day. He should have hidden inside Jerusalem's walls. He should have surrendered to the fate his illness had written for him. But Baldwin IV did not live according to what he should do. He lived according to what a king must do. And because of that, the kingdom of Jerusalem survived, his people were saved, and the greatest general of the age was forced to flee. Montgisard was not merely a military triumph, it was a triumph of spirit over sickness, of courage over calculation, of faith over fear. It showed the world that a body can be broken, but a will can remain unshattered. It proved that a dying boy could inspire hardened warriors to achieve the impossible. That a kingdom on the edge of disaster could rise like a storm and strike with divine fury. That sometimes the hands shaking most with weakness are the ones that hold destiny steady. Baldwin IV would not live long after Montgisard. His illness would advance, his kingdom would fracture, his enemies would return, but none of that could erase what happened on that battlefield, because for one brilliant, blazing moment, a young king looked death in the face and said, "Not today." And the desert heard him. The armies of the East heard him. History heard him. Montgisard became his immortality. So when we remember this battle, we do not remember the disease. We do not remember the weakness. We do not remember the pain. We remember the charge, the defiant shout, the courage that defied fate. We remember a king who fought not for glory, but for his people. A king whose body was failing, but whose heart was stronger than armies. And we remember this truth: greatness is not measured by the strength of your body, but by the strength of your resolve. Baldwin IV proved that a dying boy could shape the world. He proved that courage can rewrite destiny. He proved that the human spirit, when ignited by purpose, can become truly unstoppable. Montgisard is his message to us. When everything says you should fall, stand. When the world expects you to surrender, fight. And when fate tells you that you cannot win, defy it.